Hi, everybody. We are going to get started. It's 1 o'clock Eastern. So welcome. Thank you for joining us again for another Gimmal education session. My name is Marcia Shields, and I'm from our customer success team. Our goal for these sessions are really to enhance your expertise with your Gimmal software. And as you can see, we are recording this session and it will be shared after the event. Jeff Tuish is with me today. He will be your subject matter expert demonstrating Gimmal Discover for today's session. Jeff's going to be discussing how Discover can be used to search, analyze, and address content on your laptops and desktops, ensuring your org stays compliant within its governance policies. Format's going to be the same as usual. We're going to do about 15 to 20 minutes of product demonstration and discussion, and then we will allow for questions after that for about 10 minutes for Q&A. Jeff, I think that's all I have, so I'm going to hand things over to you so you can begin.
Great. Thanks, Marcia. Hello, everybody, and thanks for attending today. So we are going to talk about endpoints. So what are our concerns about endpoints? Well, the concerns for endpoints are the same exact concerns as we have for any other unstructured data in your environment. The same thing on your file shares, OneDrive, SharePoint, where, quite honestly, users, and I'm not saying I'm not one of them, users hoard data. So we put things out there thinking that we'll use it, and we never do anything with it. But part of the concerns that we have regarding now, I mean, different than 10 years ago, is the sensitive data that's out there and the amount of ransomware attacks and hacks that are happening. So here's the concerns. We have that the PII, the personally identifiable information. And if you've been on any other education session with me, you know how much I really love going after PII and be able to identify it. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, those are things like social security numbers, credit card numbers, anything, email addresses, anything that uniquely identifies a person is PII. I mean, that goes into the healthcare industry as well. And PCI is credit cards, PHI is health. So the different PIs that are out there can all be contained on laptops. PSD files, because you have a lot of companies aren't allowing PSD files anymore, but there's data in those PSD files that is most likely old and could be sensitive. There could be emails or attachments in the emails that have sensitive data attached to them. Software itself being installed on the laptops, whether or not your company allows unique software to be installed. Data leakage, big concern with that is, especially on laptops, is the laptop being stolen. So it's sitting in a car somewhere in your trunk, in your house, and it's stolen. If the drive is not encrypted, then you could possibly have some data leakage going out there with sensitive data. And lastly, of course, litigation. We are a very litigious society, so having information sitting out there that could pertain to a legal case is also something of a concern. So we have some risks on that as well, and you'll see data leakage twice on here. But phishing, I'm sure that we have all seen that. We actually here at Gimmal, we have occasionally, actually on a periodic basis, I'll get an email and I'll look at it going, I don't know who this is. And this actually, I'm being tested for phishing. And then I get rewarded with an email if I actually identified that properly. So be wary of that. Don't be clicking on things you don't want to do. Bad actors, that is meaning people inside the company who could be doing things that are not approved by others, of course. Stolen or lost laptops again, and then malware, which all you familiar with as well. All these things are unique to laptops because these are devices that actually can leave the office. We got to talk about things like OneDrive and SharePoint. That stuff's in the cloud. There's not as much physical concern about that. Laptops and desktops, that's where the physical security comes into play, and just need to be made aware of that. So what can we do? And how can we find content on laptops and desktops? So when we say endpoints, that's what we typically mean. And that can both be for with Discover, is both for Mac and Windows laptops and desktops that we can connect, and we can go out looking for data. So you can do that via keywords. So things like looking for a particular word or a series of words if you have a list. One of the things that Discover offers is the ability to say, hey, I have a list of words in a vertical slash, and I just want to see if Discover can find any of those. So you can have those. You can either do an and, which is having to find every keyword, or an or, which is finding any of those, which determine a true positive. You can do a phrase, and there's a lot of different things you can do with those, like a first name, last name. If a space is part of a content like my name, Jeff Space Two-ish, you would encapsulate that in double quotes. So now you're actually looking for that proper name. Search expressions, you can get pretty darn fancy with these. Just like we can do with any other unstructured content with Discover, you can go out and find the search expressions using ands and ors and parentheses like the old math equations, and proximity, excludes, wildcards. All of those things can be done with the search expressions to get very, very detailed and focused on what you're looking for. And then lastly, for those of you who have ever had any sessions of these with me, regular expressions, as I like to say, I'm just scraping the surface on my knowledge on those. But basically what those are for finding that pattern type data, like a social security number or a credit card. And just to let you know, if you are going into the dark, powerful world of regex, there's a lot of strength in there of what you can do. You can even be smart with your expressions so that instead of just looking for a pattern, you can actually have the regex be created so that you're looking for maybe some proximity words in front or behind that regex, or you're looking for a specific value, like a social. You can make sure that only the valid social security numbers that the government has issued would be considered a match. So you can do a lot of powerful things with the regular expressions as well. Any of these can be used. And in addition, once we find that data, so you've gone out and used any one of these things to do it, we can also use metadata. So I didn't want to exclude that. So anything like we're looking at files, we could look at the file name, the folder name where we found it, the extension of the file, any one of the 3 dates, created, modification, or last access. All of that can also be used in your criteria to interrogate the data to see, is this something of which I should be concerned? Once we have found those using any of these or the metadata checks, you can then remediate that data. And I mean by that is we could go out and maybe copy it to a network share or move it to a network share. Or we could go out and just simply delete that file or produce a report and show it to the data owner, to the laptop owner, and saying, look what we found, you need to make some decisions about that. So use your imagination on that. You can basically go through and do any permutation of these. You don't have to always delete. You don't have to always move. You can go out and perform an analysis first. So whatever the culture or any litigation or legal things enforce upon you, you can do all that. Politics as well, to be able to decide what you want to do once you find that data. What a lot of people want to do is just get an insight as to what is out there, what's being stored on laptops. Now, I know there's some companies that are locking laptops down and they're not allowing any data to be stored there, and they're using OneDrive as the place to put that data. Just as a side note, now instead of storing something on my laptop that I'm never using again, I can go store it on OneDrive and do the same thing. But so we also have inside of Discover the ability to process data sitting out on OneDrive. So once again, here's some of the actions we can take, but I want to talk about that second one there because we're going to focus on that. So you identify as the reporting, copy, move, delete. I think those are pretty self-explanatory. What classified does for us is allows us to go out and put a label on the data itself, which would persist if the file was moved. So what you means you can do is this is a proactive step. You can actually go out and say, okay, I want to go out to all the laptops and I want to mark all the files that have particular keywords or whatever they might be, and I'm going to put a label on those. So how does that help you? Well, what that means is that from that point forward, the next time you need to look for something that's sensitive or confidential, whatever the label might be, you've already done the heavy lifting. You've already cracked open those files and looked at the content, assigned the proper label to it. So now if we want to do a remediation action like copy, move, or delete, instead of having to run the entire set of data, we can now say, I only want to process the files that have this particular label on them. So this is a very powerful mechanism. And I'm going to show you some stats into one of my favorite new things that I use, Power BI, as we get near the end, just to give you some insight on what you can do with that. So with that said, that was my segue, by the way, into Power BI. And let's go into that because I think these reports are going to be very telling and to give you some idea of what you're looking at out here. So I'm hoping, Marcia, can you confirm you're seeing my
Yep, all good.
Power BI? Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, so what I've done out here is if you've been with me on any other sessions, you're also going to probably see a lot of the Power BI stuff, because I'm quite the advocate. I should probably buy stock in this, but I'm quite the advocate on this because I think it offers a very analytical, visual way of looking at your data. So what I've done on this is I've gone out and I had 10 different labels, and you'll see that here under the classification column. And these are the labels that I applied to 20 different endpoints out there, which had roughly 2,000 folders, 1.25 million files on them, and they consume about 177 gigabytes of data. So these are just some sample numbers that I have. And what it's doing for us is allowing me now to say, okay, I can run a report inside of Gimmal Discover, export that out and put it in the Power BI and be able to analyze and make sense of that data. So what it's showing me first is all the classifications, and you'll see that, how many are within images, how many within text. So question, how can we do image files? Well, we don't actually convert a TIFF file or an image PDF, but what we can do is find the text within it and then look at that text and decide if the content search that you're doing is a match. So the file is going to be in the same format when we're done with it, but we're able to look at the text inside of that to once again be able to assign these labels. So how many image, how many text, and then we have some flags that are on every file sitting on any drive anywhere. There's an archive for protected and a system flag. So just showing you those statistics and then breaking it down by extension. So I didn't, in this particular case, look for any particular extension. You could do that in your searching. But if you didn't have any criteria for your extension, every extension that was found is going to show up in this list. And then you could go through and do something like this, saying, I want to sort by the most prevalent extension. And we'll see here that spreadsheets, in this case, have the most files. So it just gives you some nice stats on those. So this is the data that we searched, and this is the data that we found. So we went out and found 205,000 files that contained data for this. So 205,000 files were classified with one of these labels. And then once again, breaking down the totals on this. We go into the charts, some nice pretty charts, which everybody always loves. So this is showing you a nice little pie chart to give you an idea of the prevalence of one label over another, showing you the files by their extension. Once again, a nice graphical view of that. And then a little bit of just a little pie chart here where we have the text versus the image files. If I go to statistics, what you're going to see here is this is the endpoint name, so the computer name. And we have L for laptop and D for desktop in this case. And then the owner of that laptop. And we're showing this is a snapshot of their hard drive. This is not how many files we classified. This is the counts and number of folders they have, number of files, and the total size of their data sitting out there on their laptop or desktop. But then to the right of it, showing you stats, well, 18% of Barbara's files have a label applied to them. So just giving you statistics about that. And the same thing with the size as well. So that's regarding the actual whole data. But then this is my favorite part. These are things called slicers for those of you who are not familiar with Power BI. And you're going to notice the totals we have here, once again, representing this. But here's what I can do with this. I can go out and say, I only want to know about confidential that are between 2 and 3 years old, that are Word documents. And now my totals adjust based upon these filters that I applied. So it gives you some nice insight. So we're sort of doing a little rod analysis here at the same time, but giving you an idea of using the classification, the age range, and the extension to be able to go out and get some insight as to what you have out here. So how can we process endpoints, and how do we process endpoints? Well, if you have an instance of Discover already, and you're processing Windows file paths, and you've already made up some workflows that are going out to your file shares and processing that data, good news. You can use that exact same workflow to go against your Windows-based laptops and desktops. If you have a Mac, you would have to make up a new workflow because those are Mac-specific. But anything that is Windows-based, if you're having anything for your file shares, you can reuse that same one and just point it to the endpoints as opposed to pointing it to the file shares. So I'm going to go back to the slides. I know we're getting close to where we want to be, and let me advance. So Questions, Q&A time, Marcia. Do we have anything in the hopper that I can
We
possibly answer?
we do. We have a few actually.
Awesome.
And great information, Jeff, by the way. Very, very good
Thanks.
information. First question is, what is involved in the deployment of connecting Discover with endpoints to manage?
Good question. So how do we do this? Well, for those of you familiar with Discover, which obviously you're part of the education session, so I'm assuming you're a Discover customer, then you already know we have Discover installed typically on a VM in your environment, which is where the connector and the agents both reside, and then we reach out to the data. With the endpoints, we actually install a connector and a file agent on every desktop and laptop. So first, before you fall out of your chair, you don't need to make a physical visit to everybody's laptop and desktop. That's not something that we require. The way you would do this is you would actually record the session of you installing the connector and the agent on one laptop or desktop, and then use that in a silent deployment like SCCM or whatever patch software you have that deploys software silently to your desktops and laptops. You could use that as a script to be able to deploy to either the entire set of endpoints or to a subset.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Another question we've got is there a maximum number of endpoints that Discover can manage?
There is not. In fact, we have a client right now with, I want to say, Marcia, correct me if I'm wrong, I think north of 140,000 desktops that we're managing with that. So they are actually going out and looking for specific content stored on the hard drives, and they want to make sure I'm not quite sure what action they're taking. I'm not privy to that, but I know they're looking for specific data to be able to have awareness of what they found.
True. Yep, I know what you're talking about. And then we do have one more. Will the users know if anything's happening on their machines as Discover is working?
No, and let me give you some more insight too. I guess I didn't fully give you an idea of how this works. So first off, to answer your question, no, because it's basically another user on the laptop. So those agents and connector are Windows services, just like they are in the VMs. So they're just running in the background, working through it. They don't demand exclusivity of the files by any means. So it's not like we're locking a file when we're processing it. The users can still get in and do whatever they want to with it. So they should be none the wiser that's going on. And it's your call whether or not you want to make them aware that you've installed something on their laptop. But the way this works is that there needs to be some network connectivity on this. So you have a workflow and you have the policy. When you start the policy, just like the VM connector must, the desktop connector needs to be able to pull the work down from the database. And then once that's done, we no longer need a network connection until it's time to push the reports and the logs back up to the cloud. So the user could disconnect from that point. The Windows service, the agent processing will still happen. And then when it's done, we need a reconnect so that we can push it back up to the cloud to be able for you as the administrator to view what happened on that particular endpoint.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. I don't see any other questions, but if anybody does have them, you can use the Q&A area still. Look clear. Thank you, Jeff. Perfect. Okay. So as a reminder, these education sessions were going to be offered twice a month, and we do them across our Gimmal Records, Gimmal Physical, and Gimmal Discover products. Our next education session is July 11th for Gimmal Records, and the next Discover session for those Discover users, August 8th. And August 8th is a Thursday. We've switched up our days so we can get some non-Tuesday people into Thursdays, just to be fair for the second half of the year. If you'd like more information on the topic we discussed today or have suggestions for future sessions, please do pass along those to myself. We're always looking for things as we build these out, and we want to make sure we're building out the right things for you. That's all we have today. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.